Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're looking at the Cre8audio Assembler. It's an analog performance mixer. You weren't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that. This is, in a box, a fantastic, spoiler, mixer for Eurorack and other things, for other bits and pieces, for desktop synthesizers and all that kind of stuff. It's got the power to mix, I would say about a dozen channels of stuff in a lovely little compact box that could easily fit into your Eurorack system if you so wish. Or, like me right now, I've got it on the outside because it comes in its own case, allowing you to have this option. So for me, for instance, last night I had a gig in Norwich and this was my setup. I was able to use more modules within my system because I didn't have little mixers knocking around or a large mixer knocking around. I was able to bring everything out to this. There was a bit of cabling involved, of course, naturally, but the ability to bring the mixing out of it like this, it's something that a lot of people do with regular mixers, with regular, normal desktop sort of mixers. But the great thing about this, I'm finding, is its size and its accessibility and the fact that it has the sort of features that I want for my Eurorack. I don't want a mixing console that's got huge channel strips of stuff. That's not really what I'm trying to do when I'm doing live performance or when I'm just playing around at home. That's not really what I'm after. Whereas this has got, to me, a near as damn it perfect little feature set for exactly what I want to do. Now, I've fussed around with mixers for ages. I've had all sorts of mixers, tried all sorts of stuff out. There's a feedback one, the BX, which I really liked, that's a similar size actually, which sits nicely in things, but also I struggled a little bit with noise on it and other bits and pieces, so I used it, didn't use it, ended up trying to use something else. I've used little mixers like the DPW mix over here, that I've used regularly for 4 channels of mixing, which has been great, but it's not been a very hands-on thing. It's a sort of set and forget sort of mixer, but good sound, useful, but you sort of lose your creative options, which is what I don't want to do. Because what I like about having a mixer is that you can turn things off and you can turn things on and you can turn things up and you can turn things down, and that is useful in terms of trying to pull off a live performance. I think. Now, a lot of Eurorack mixers they're either big and expensive or they're small and just don't quite have enough. There's a lot of really great sort of 4 to 6 channel mixers which I've thought about and tossed about in the idea, well, maybe that's just enough, maybe because it's not quite so wide, you're not using up quite so much space, so it's useful. It might have an auxiliary send and return, it might not. I tend to find those things very useful, and so it's something that I'm looking for. So the smaller mixers have not quite done it for me. Now, I had a big whacking mixer recently that I did a review on, which was the Board Brain Xylon mixer. Now that was quite extraordinary, but in some ways it was overwhelming. It was so big. It had so many options and features. You could voltage control everything, which was brilliantly creative, but also a lot more than I really needed for the everyday doing stuff. And so it just ended up taking up a heck of a lot of space. Very, very good though. Heartily recommend it if that's your thing. And so my search for the perfect mixer keeps going on and on and on. And then Cre8audio sent me this. I think this is a keeper. I'm not going to keep you in suspense or anything. I really, really like it. It's really fitting brilliantly well with what I'm trying to achieve. It has the right number of channels. It has auxiliary sends. It has mute buttons. It has master and cue outputs. It just has the right feature set. It doesn't have a massive EQ. It doesn't have a massive complexity. It does have a couple of channels with EQ. Which is interesting, which is useful. But otherwise, you've got both mono and stereo channels, because that's the other thing. I'm increasingly finding that I have stuff that wants to be in stereo, And so the stereo mixer I had up here, the DPW one, was very useful for that because it was 4 channels of stereo mixing. Now this has 2 channels of stereo mixing, but that's actually enough for me, because even when I was using the stereo mixer, I was only using a couple of channels of stereo, the rest was in mono. And you can always use a pair of mono channels as a stereo channel. That's always a possibility. And when you have as many channels as this offers, then that is a reality. You're not even having to compromise, because in my entire set here, there's 2 channels I'm not using. 5 and 6, I'm not using them because I've got no more sounds. I've only got so many voices I could use at one time. And so what I'm saying is that this really ticks all of my boxes. I never asked them to do this, but I may as well have sent them a list of my requirements, and they went, all right, yeah, no, we can sort that out. And we'll even sprinkle some EQ in, even though I know he's never going to use it, because he can never be bothered, which is true, let's face it. So I'm going to take you through it, come in a little bit closer, demo it a bit, because I mean it's a bit cabley. There are shortcomings, of course. Every device has its awesomeness and has a few things where you just go, because not everything can be everything to all people. And this has 1 or 2 little bits to it. Does it? Oh, barely. Barely. But one of them being, of course, the cabling. But cabling is a reality. It's just a fact of life. So at my gig, for instance, I had like 5 minutes to set up. So I put this up, and then I've got to connect the 2 things together. That's the one disadvantage of having this outside the case, because then I'm going, this goes to, does that go to there? That goes to there. So there's a little bit of shimmy shammying about in order to get that to work. So if I did have this in the case, using up this big chunk of HP, I could have actually had it pre-patched, which may or may not help you. I don't know. I mean, I think for my personal situation, which is mainly chaos in this corner of the room, lots of different things going on, this could just help things. I mean, I need to put it on an arm so it can come out and I could plug things into it, because it's brilliantly useful. I mean, I've got, like, over here, right, I've got the big 6, big chunky proper mixer that does things. Honestly, I use 2 channels on it. I use the output from this, goes into a couple of channels, and then that routes over to my desktop PC where I record everything. That's fine, that's great. But I'm very rarely plugging things into it. I mean, if nothing else, it's because there's nowhere to plug things. It's all round the back, which is really very, very annoying. So for something which is a bit dirtier, a bit straightforward, a bit immediately right there, this is it. It could just be knocking around any old where, and whenever I need to hear something, I can just plug straight into it. Brilliant. The other thing is that it's not covered, festooned in buttons, so I'm not trying to work out what it is that's not working, because that's what I do a lot on any mixer. In any situation, you plug a load of stuff in, you can't hear any of it, and you spend 20 minutes going This doesn't have any of that. You just plug it in and you've got an up and downy knob, and on and offy button. Job done. Brilliant. Super. So yeah, this is a winner already. It's definitely sticking around, that's for sure, because this is totally it. And as if I needed to prove it to myself, using it in the gig last night was brilliant. Just superb. I could see what I was doing. I had some idea as to what I was doing. I could turn stuff up, I could turn stuff down, and that was nice. And that allowed me also to focus in more on this. And I've got a whole 2 extra voices in this case that I wouldn't necessarily normally have because of all the mixing bits and pieces. So that's really interesting too. Yeah, it's really opened things up for me. Yeah, definitely enthusiasing about this one, I think. I wish I knew how much it cost. $399. $399. That's all right. That is $399. Okay, yeah, all right. A decent price for a decent product. I think it's not throwaway cheap and chips type area, but it is it is doing a lot, potentially bringing a lot to the table, solving a lot of problems. And compared to, any other Eurorack mixer, I think that's a pretty decent price. Pretty decent price. Right. Let me bring you in, and we'll fiddle around, and I'll just it's just a mixer. How hard is it going to be? I'll show you what it's about. In fact, what I'll do while I'm setting up, why don't you have a look at something I shot earlier. Right, here we are. Difficult to see the name on it because of all the bleeding cables. Yeah, cables, you can see that at the top there. Yeah. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff plugged in, as you can see. It could have a scribble strip. You could stick a bit of tape along here so you can write on what everything does, or you can just try to remember, because it's not that big a mixer really at the end of the day. It's not easy to see where everything goes, but you can do all sorts of things, like you can label cables. There's no end to those sorts of possibilities. So the basic setup is you've got 6 channels of mono along the top, 2 channels of stereo, then you've got 3 auxiliary sends. That is your input output section. That's pretty much it. You've got headphones and main out. The headphones can have a separate Q mix to the main out, which is nice. At least I believe it's nice. It's not something I've ever really grasped fully or used in anger, because I'm always too scared of actually sending the thing live that I'm trying to do, well, I'm not doing, if that makes sense. But I will work out that. I will work it out, and I will get better at that kind of thing. To the first 2 channels also have high and low EQ. Apparently this is a vintage type EQ, which is nice. We'll have a look at that in a moment. And then the next 4 channels, 3 to 6, are a bit more regular. You've got pan, as you have on all of them, and you've got 2 auxiliary sends, which I'll go into. And then squeezed over here are your 2 stereo channels, which are kind of on one channel. That can be confusing, but it's just a matter of a little bit of practice. So I've got 7 and 8 stuck in the middle here, 9 and 10 down here with their corresponding buttons. Then you've got auxiliary returns. Of course, auxiliary returns can also be extra channels. So essentially you get to 9, 10, then the stereo return 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, potentially 15 mixable inputs if you use each of the stereo channels as 2 monos, if you get me. Or it could be 6 mono, then 2 stereo plus 2 stereo from the auxiliary returns, and 1 mono, because the third auxiliary is mono. So you've got a lot in here. If you needed to squeeze another input in and didn't mind sacrificing auxiliaries, that's what you can do. Okay, that's it, really, that's it. That's not much more to say than that. But of course, I like to talk. So let's keep going. So simplicity, on and off buttons. Like that. So I've got some drums going through there. Let me turn on a little bit. This is coming from the Rhythmy and the Beatsy, which is doing an interesting job, and I'll be having a review on that soon. So let's turn that on. There's a little bit of drums coming through there. So it's got a high and low EQ. Low. Pushing it to clip, which is nice. Pan, of course. And then you've got 2 auxiliaries. Now you can choose the second auxiliary. You can swap between 2 and 3 through a button, a bit of button shenanigans. You hold the button and you press the channel, and it will swap what auxiliary it's using. This is a system that it uses throughout. Similarly, there's a gain boost you can turn on, and for queuing to the headphones, you hold the button, which is over here, and press the relevant channel. Yeah. So auxiliary 1, I've got routing to a reverb. Ooh, a little bit hot on that. The reverb is over here somewhere. Here it is. It's the Erica Synths reverb. And on auxiliary 2, I've got a delay. The great thing about auxiliaries is they allow you to use one effect module on all the channels, which is brilliant. That's something that I've struggled with recently, because I didn't have any auxiliaries on the way that I was mixing stuff together, and that meant I had to sort of devote an entire effects unit to one thing, which is not always what you want to do. That's all the EQ down. That's all the EQ up. Alright, I'll turn that off. and then go to channel 2 where I've got a bit of synthesizing stuff going on. So again, panning, 2 auxiliaries, reverb. I've also got an extra delay. It has its own delay too. Just gives me options, you know. EQ. The other great thing about auxiliaries is because the return is coming back somewhere else, you get the tails of that delay still coming through the system. So even when you mute the channel, you've still got that going on. That's also a feature of my glorious bypass module, I have to say. The knobs here are really smooth, really easy, no bother. Now I would say, get rid of those two for the minute, that the spacing and the gapping in here is tight. It's not awesome. It's not awesome. I mean, Cre8audio, I think, made a gazillion billion of these knobs, and so, you know, they're sticking with it, and that's their style, and that's fine. And on the whole, particularly when you've got a little bit of space around them, they're good. And I like the fact that my fingers can feel where the pointer is, so I don't actually have to see all the time. I can feel where that is, and that helps me navigate that knob around the place. That's a good feature. I like that. In here, it's a little bit troublesome. I mean, if I can be bothered at some point, I think I'll probably take these ones off and put on some slightly smaller ones just on the EQ, just to give everything else a little bit more room. I think that's something that I might ponder, perhaps. But you are trying to stay within a certain size of device, and so these things are kind of inevitable. Otherwise, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But on the whole, particularly over here, these are fine. These are all fine. It's not spacious, but it's also not cramped. This is the only place where it just starts to feel like it could be just a little bit. So on the simpler channels, this is just here, so there's no EQ, but there's aux again, and panning. And then on 4, got slightly out of tune surface going on. Now the mutes seem relatively soft to me. I'm not experiencing really any clicking. Which seems nice. Great, so one secret power that the mixer has is this gain boost, which gives it 20 dB of boost on whatever channel you want. I mean, that's a huge amount. Because there's no gain input, you've got no gain control on any of the inputs, so that does perhaps reduce what you can do, what you can use it with. But I imagine what's going on is that the 20 dB boost is essentially for putting line level stuff in. So your little synths knocking around, you want to plug those in, you're probably going to need the boost. I mean, I can demonstrate it to you using channel 2, for instance. If I just stick it on, it'll just go through the roof. But if I bring that all the way down and then turn the boost on, it's now the same sort of level right down here. And then brings in quite a nice level of saturation. So you can imagine using that on a bit of a bass line. In fact, I have a bass line right over here. Let's try that. Take that off. That's it flat out. That's with lots more to give. Anyway, getting carried away now. So that gain boost on the right sort of material is really laying into it. It's really bringing and pushing in to a lovely amount of overdrive on that bass line. I mean, yeah, okay, it's great for bringing up line level stuff to a Eurorack level, but it's also really good at doing wonderful things to the waveforms of other stuff. So that's rather nice. Use sparingly, I would suggest. Don't stick it on when your level is already up, or you're going to break things. And nobody wants to break things. But use in an interesting place, that can be pretty extraordinary. So what else have I got on here? Well, I got the 2 stereo channels. You've already heard the bass line, which was sounding very polite up to its point. But I've also got some strings in here, some pads from the Polycinematic. Now you've got no balance control or anything over the stereo channel, you know, it's very, very simple. All you've got is a single auxiliary and a level control. You've got metering on everything, which is also brilliant, I should point out. I've not got it to hit the red yet, which is probably no bad thing. But, you know, it's completely and absolutely useful because it's telling you that stuff is going on those channels. You know, which is awesome. So just a quick look at the auxiliary switching. So 9 and 10, for instance, here, they've only got one auxiliary. And I've currently got that set to nothing at all, I don't think. I must have it set to 3. So this has confused me a little bit, but I'm going to try to work it out for you. So there's an auxiliary send button. I press that, and then I press the channel number. It's just I don't know how to work out how you know what it's on. Okay, so it's flashing, and it sounds very much like it's on the reverb. Okay, and the reverb is on auxiliary 1. So if I hold it again and press it again, I should now be on auxiliary 2, which is the delay, which I am. And if I press it again, that should be auxiliary 3, which isn't going to anything. So, alright, I understand what this means now. Got it, right. So if you hold it, press it, if it's flashing, it's 1. If it's off, it's 2. If it's on, it's 3. Got it. And evidently you can turn off the returns as well on these 3 buttons. I mean, that's it. Isn't that it? That's about it. There's the cue. So everything currently is going to headphones. I can turn the headphones off. Let me plug some headphones in, right? Just so I can tell you exactly what that does. Fabulous pair of orange headphones. Can't recommend them enough. Okay, so what you experience on the headphones is different to what you've got on the front panel. So by holding this, I've got everything on at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out, just going to test what happens when I change the levels on the headphones. Now, you're not hearing this at the moment. I'm going to tell you about it, all right? Okay. So it is down to the levels. It's just whether it's on or off. So I can take everything out of the headphones by holding Q and take them all out. So the idea being that it allows you to have channels off, which are channels off or on which are going to the main speakers. So the main speakers is based upon this. So I could be listening to something else. So I could go on the headphones, I could turn on these three, get those sorted before I turn them onto the main mix. That is the idea. I think that's the idea. That's what this is. This is what this is all about. So, I guess as a general rule, you would have everything on both because you're just listening or monitoring. But if you wanted to bring something in, you need to get that right first. You could turn the channel off here. So if I wanted to bring the drums in, I could have it on the drums. In fact, I could just have the drums on. Listen to the drums on my headphones. No, that's not how that's working. Alright, so the headphone seems to have whatever's on, regardless of what's on here. Right? Because I'm hearing everything. And when I've turned everything else off, I'm still getting the drums. But my headphone mix isn't dependent on those other channels being on. It just gives me that option. Alright, I mean, you can work that out for yourself, okay? I'm not going to spend all day trying to work out if I can understand cue mixing. I'm sure it's a thing, and we get it. You've got your own separate headphone output as well as the main output, which has stereo metering, which is nice. So yeah, that is everything now, I think. Yeah, that's everything. There's no other special ports on the box at all. It comes at a nice rakish angle, which is cool. I like that. The cabling, as I say, is held out of the way, which is fine. Not having to worry about it. Unless I want to constantly gaze at the name, in which case that gets a little bit obscured. As I say, a scribble strip. Put a bit of masking tape here, that might be nice. But otherwise, yeah, that's it. That's it. There's no more really to say about than that. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So yeah, the assembler from Cre8audio. It's a keeper. It's definitely a keeper. This has become the solution I've been looking for. Until something better comes along or I just completely change what it is I'm trying to do. This is simple. I understand it. It's uncomplicated. It is straightforward. You've got once you've worked out, the most complicated thing of the lot is the two stereo channels which share this bit here. Because I'm forever turning the auxiliary knob by accident, thinking it's the level knob, because funnily enough, in a dark situation, the white stands out more than the blue. So maybe it would have been better if the level knobs were white and the other knobs were blue. I don't know. Then would that have been different? I don't know. But it's certainly with these two, it's something that I did keep getting in a mess with. But it's just, it's just practice. It's just practice. So there you go. Nicely done. You can push it into a little bit of overload if you overdo your routing through effects. You're using auxiliaries, you're using effects slightly differently. You're tending to use them 100% wet as opposed to just a little bit. And then you're kind of doing your wet mix on the return here. At least that's what I'm finding. I have toyed with the idea of putting this in a slightly longer case. So for instance, using the... if I get hold of this one without everything falling apart. I think I can. Using the nifty case, for instance, a Cre8audio nifty case. You could stick the mixer in here and you could stick a bunch of effects there. So you've got your mixing and effects in one natty row of Eurorack. That is certainly a possibility. Because when I did my gig at Synths, I took this with the surface in and a disting in and a few other bits and pieces in this case along with my larger case. And that makes for me a good a good decent setup. But funnily enough, I've been able to rework it into one case and this pretty much without really losing anything, which has been really good. But definitely potentially using a small skiff, a 60 HP or slightly longer case just down here to have mixing and effects in it would again release your Eurorack for more voices and more modulation and more sequencing and bits and pieces. I mean, that's the other thing. A little sequencer this size, something like the ground control from Endorphins, alongside this in a little case. Wow, I mean, that would also be quite extraordinary. Sequencing and mixing. You've got both ends of your signal flow all happening in one case. That would be interesting. I wonder if Cre8audio are going to come up with a sequencer in that way. No, but they have come up with an analog drum machine. I wasn't expecting that either. Called Boom Chick. Fantastic. Well, I'm going to be looking at this in some depth very, very soon. I haven't quite gotten around to it yet, but I'll have a look at that maybe this afternoon. Would be a good place to start. So there will be a review of that as well coming along very shortly. But in the meantime, to summarise, does a job. Fantastic. Good job. The assembler from Cre8audio. It's going to be part of my flow, I think, going forward, which is a decent recommendation. And I hope that was ultimately helpful. So in the meantime, go make some tunes.